Where do I share it?
At the
I
bottom.
think it's at the bottom of your screen. It says share screen.
Oh yeah.
Jerry looked it up. It was Paula Schmiedel did that very impressive mask photo.
What are you seeing?
I am seeing your Zoom screen, not your beginning of your presentation screen. I see you going over to get it. Going into Word, there you go. So now we're seeing your intro picture and it's just not quite filling the screen. Yep, keep going up so we can read the words at the bottom. Great.
I recommend full
and then-
screen is probably better up in that upper right.
Okay.
It's very
And
visual.
Then everybody, if you're seeing some of the faces on the right, you know, you should see Larry, but also at the top of that film strip, if you will, of pictures, you have different options. You can hit a grid, you can hit, just Larry fills your screen, or a number of other things. So you have options there as to if you're finding seeing some faces is annoying, you can ditch us and make Larry your huge screen. Okay, Larry, I'm going to mute myself, mute everybody.
Okay. Can everybody hear me okay? Can anybody not hear me? This is an HDR of the moon, and you can Google how to do these HDR shots where you can get the moon, the dark side of the moon that's in a quarter moon or whatever to be as bright. This is a full moon, so it didn't really work. But the reason that I titled the Fiddling with the Wolf Moon, Learn How to Howl, because William Thumb assures me that astrophotography will eventually drive you insane. And I kind of have to agree with that after working with it quite a bit. And the focus of this workshop is going to be on SLR cameras rather than telescopes. We'll mention telescopes, but the whole idea is you can just go out and use your camera and point it to the sky on a tripod and see amazing things. One of the first shots that I took when I was really trying to be a little bit more serious, this was just a single shot, and I saw the Milky Way, a tree, and right here is Andromeda. Very visible. You can see this with your naked eye on a clear night or with a pair of binoculars. And so that really got me hooked. And I thought, gosh, you know, you can take a look and see stuff up. I turned to Saturn and Jupiter, and with my 500mm lens, no tracker, I was able to take shots like this. And you have to zoom in and do some enhancement work, but it's all there available. Just point your camera. Let me talk a little bit about some of the equipment that you could use. Now, the refractor telescopes, the old, you know, Galileo probably used a refractor. That's just lenses that amplifies the light. And then I think it was Isaac Newton invented the reflector telescope, which uses a mirror in the back, a curved mirror to amplify the light. And they're much smaller. They started making telescopes in like the 1800s that they got bigger and bigger. Pretty soon they were like 60, 80, 100 feet long. And so the mirrored telescope really condenses the size of it. Your SLR camera, that's essentially a refractor telescope. The difference being it has extremely powerful amplifier, which is the LCD, the sensor. They're really perfect, and you'll see why in a little bit later. There's digital telescopes, these little round guys. You stick them in the end of a telescope, and it hooks up with a wire to your iPad or to computer. You can record videos and take pictures from these little tiny cameras. And if you want to hook a really high quality SLR camera on, you get what's called a T-ring, and this part inserts into the telescope, and this bolts onto your camera, and you can focus and take shots straight with your camera through a telescope. To get a little bit more sophisticated, they have things called trackers. This is a tracker. I own one of these, and it simply turns at the same speed as the rotation of the Earth and keeps things centered so that you can take shots for a number of minutes. There's some solar hydrogen alpha scopes. And these, I'll show you some pictures a little bit later. These are amazing. You can look at the surface of the sun and see solar flares coming off of the edges of it. Auto-guided trackers are used. This thing bolts right on it. They're little tiny telescopes with a camera in the back, and you can put the crosshairs on a star and then press a button, and they'll track that star. If it starts to move, it'll send your tracker additional information that keeps the telescope centered, so you can take 2, 3, 4 minute exposures. And something I used a lot is Skyview. This is fun to do if you're not even doing any photography. Just walk out and Skyview app. You can load this up on your phone. I think it's a couple bucks for the professional version, and you just hold your cell phone up to the sky, and anything that a little circle points to, it tells you what it is. Oh, this is Andromeda, or this is the moon. Amazing. And also, for some of the richer folks out there, you can rent an observatory. You can go and say, hey, I want to take a picture of Jupiter on this date. Then, you have to pay for it, obviously, but one of the advantages is you own the shot, the results. But some of the observatories that are not quite as state of the art as they used to be, or they have open time. I was surprised that you could rent an observatory. You can even get into an app and control the telescope directly and then take pictures. Amazing. Now, some of the differences between the camera and a telescope and some other devices. Here's like a picture of the moon taken with my camera. And then here's one taken with an 8-inch reflector telescope. You can see there's obviously about 4 times the magnification, really close to the moon. Both are good shots. Here's a regular old solar filter on a camera. You can see a sunspot right here. And here's an HA telescope where you're seeing the surface of the sun and solar flares coming off of it. It's amazing. But you can still take pretty decent shots of the sun if you got the right solar filter. And here's a shot of the Orion Nebula with my camera. And here's a shot from an observatory. The difference is just silly. And that's the other thing. If you really want to get some good shots, you can go out online and you can buy shots from observatories. They're going to be 100 times better than you could ever take on your own. But I find taking shots in the sky exciting. And the first time I ever saw Jupiter and Saturn stunned me. I was looking through a little spotting scope. They're just like the textbooks. You can look up with a pair of binoculars and you can see Saturn's rings and you can see Jupiter. Here's a comparison of this is the day before the conjunction, and you can see Jupiter's terrible. You can't see any lines or definitions. You can see the moons, and Saturn's a little blurry fuzz. Here's with a really good refractor telescope. See, Jupiter is real clear. You can see the bands on the planet, and they're pretty equivalent. Obviously, the telescopes are going to be much better in the long run, but you can do this with your camera. Here's a single shot without any tracking of the Milky Way. Just crank up my ISO and take a shot for about a second. And then here's a shot with a tracker. And that's what the Milky Way really looks like. And you can see the obvious difference in the advantages of a tracker. It's just tremendous. We're going to talk about that in a second. Here's a shot I took of the Neowise comet. And there's also a meteor streak right here. That's what I took, the best equipment I had, best lens I had. And here's an SLR tracker version of the comet, just so much better quality. And here's my tracker. This white thing's the tracker motor. Here's my camera. Here's a counterweight. And here's something like the telescope I've got. The reason I included this is a SLR camera that's stuck into a T-ring into the back of a telescope. So you got the telescope and the camera advantages of both. And the cell phone app Skyview, this is an example of that. You can just simply hold it up and it'll show you Mars and Uranus and constellations and name them. And you can find stuff. It'll have a pointer arrow. It says, where's Orion? An arrow will appear on one side and you move the direction it tells you, and then until it finds it. So you don't even need to learn the constellations anymore. You can just look at the sky with a cell phone. Okay, I'm going to go through these quickly because I got a section coming up that talks about how to solve these problems. So let me just go through these quickly just to familiarize you with some of the problems that are related to astrophotography. It's a very difficult thing to do. Star trails, that's probably the #1 biggest problem. It's where you open your shutter too long and the stars leave a streak on your image, and it just ruins everything. Satellites, there's 6,000 of them now, and you're going to run into them. You start to take shots, you'll find satellite streaks. City lights, unless you go to a dark park, you're going to have light pollution. Not much you can do about it. Clouds in the Midwest. I can't remember last time I took that Orion shot. It must have been weeks ago. That was the last clear night we've had here. So if you want to do astrophotography, if it's clear out, you got to go out, or it's going to be cloudy the next night. And then nighttime, everything's black. I mean, your subject's black. You're in the dark. I can't even see my camera. I try to look through the viewfinder and I can't see anything. I mean, that's the one of the bigger problems. I'm going to talk about that. Temperature, when it's clear, it generally is a result of a cold front, and you can get cold. You can get chilled, and the cold will cause condensation to form on your lens. And in bitter cold nights, you can actually have your electronics affected. The atmosphere, even when you go out and you see it, you go, wow, it's a beautiful night. Look how clear it is. Well, there's still, and especially in the Midwest, it looks clear, but there's constant atmospheric distortion going on in your images. The moon, it's probably your worst enemy when it comes to stars. It's going to just make the whole night sky glow. I've had many a shoot where the moon came up and ruined my entire evening. Nothing came out good. And the amount of time, if you start to do some serious guided tracking, you might be sitting for 20 minutes or hours, or even I've read about people running all night. In fact, some of the more serious people, they'll run 2, 3, 4 nights in a row and then merge their shots together. And so usually what you're doing is you're taking 20, 30, 40, 50 shots, then you're not doing anything. So you're just sitting there, your camera's on automatic, shooting all these shots, and you don't have anything to do. So it's just kind of an odd, you get all geared up and then you're not doing anything. The image orientation can change based on what type of scope you're using. And I ran out of power the first night I tried it. I ran out of batteries. How many batteries have you got? You don't really want to change your battery in the middle of a shoot, right in the middle of a stacking session. And to solve these, it usually requires a lot more money. Let's talk about star trails. Once again, this is the plague of the astrophotographers, star trails. Here's an example of a satellite streak. And also, there's star trails. This is a star trail, and this is called a pedestal. This created. This looks like a good star, and then there's a streak above it, streak below it. This is when you stack the shots together, you end up with really terrible results. They don't look like anything like stars. Although some satellites are interesting. This is a shot I got of the International Space Station. You can see the little solar panels on it. Using Skyview, I saw it below the horizon. It slowly came up, and I was ready. I was on a video tripod so I could pan smoothly with a remote trigger. And I just shoot. I shot about 100 shots of that thing, got one that looked pretty good. So some satellites are fun. Star trails. You've probably seen these shots where people take a picture toward the North Star all night long. And star trails can be fun. They follow a circular path around the North Star that expresses the rotation of the Earth. The stars are actually just sitting there and not moving, but you are. The whole Earth's turning at a certain constant rate. Now, if you point your camera toward the north, you'll get circular trails. If you point toward the celestial equator, you'll get straight angled star trails. And if you're looking toward the South Pole, the opposite direction of the North Pole, you'll get curved star trails instead of this round circular. Interesting. I've never tried the different ones. Satellites, there's not much you can do about satellite streaks until you get to post-processing. There is software that will remove satellite streaks. The other thing you can do is you can find which frame, let's say you take 60 shots of the sky, you go find that frame with the satellite streak in it, and you can just remove it from your group of shots. That's one way to get rid of it. Here's a shot. I thought I was so excited when I saw this. I thought, gosh, look, a meteor streak came along, and the meteor just went into a big spiral and it disintegrated. And there's the little dot. It vaporized right in front of me. This is like a landmark astrophotography photo. I'm so lucky. And I showed it to some professionals, and they said, nah, you got it all wrong. That's the motor on your tracker. And the satellite's going this way, and it picked up the vibrations of the startup of your motor and then smoothed out. So I was completely all wet about what that was, but it was fun to see. I had a lot of fun. Star trails. Here's a 90-second shot versus a 30-second shot. And you can clearly see there's streaks. And these are nice. What you want is the nice round stars. Oops. Now, how do you solve star streaks? You use a tracking device. Telescopes, they usually have a built-in motor that moves the telescope exactly to match the rotation of the Earth. There's a couple kinds of those. One's called Alt-AZ. That's simply the elevation above the south horizon and the compass direction. And it keeps both of those moving consistently and tries to keep what it is that you're trying to shoot centered. Here's the actual telescope I've got, and what happens when you need to do an alignment, the star will appear. I get the star to appear about right here, and then the star slowly floats to the center of this, and I'm holding a button. As soon as it gets to the center, you press the button, and it aligns the telescope to that star. And then you can go from there. You can go to a 2-star alignment or a planetary alignment. You can align to the moon. There's lots of different options. But the problem with Alt-AZ is that as the night goes on, your object slowly rotates, kind of like on a clock, like just the whole thing turns slowly. So that messes up your stacking shots later. The solution to that is called polar alignment. And it uses what's called an equatorial wedge mount, which is just an angled thing that lets you adjust the mount up and down, left and right a little bit. And it's a lot easier to align with Polaris. Polaris isn't, the North Celestial Pole is not in the very center of the North Star is not in the center of the celestial north. It's a little bit to the left or the right of it. And it circles slowly around. If you looked at the center of the North Celestial Pole, it'd be blank sky. But then Polaris is pretty obvious in the north part of the sky. This is a cell phone app that comes with the tracker. And it looks up your GPS, your date, and your time. And it says, okay, right now, Polaris should be on what looks like a clock. Polaris should be at like just before 11 o'clock right there. And so you go and you look through a little scope and you adjust Polaris until it's at exactly the same spot through your scope. Once you've done that, it's aligned and it hardly moves. Stars move in another part of the sky really rapidly. With a telescope, it's really hard to get to be ready and align it. But Polaris doesn't really move much from this little circle, so it's easy to align. Now, if you don't have a tracker or a telescope, you can use what's called the 500 rule. You've probably heard of this before, but it's simply 500 divided by the cropping factor of your lens times the focal length. That's the shutter speed you want to set your camera to so you will not have a star streak. Now, with an FX lens, 1 is the cropping factor. So basically, there is no CF with a FX lens. If you do have a different a DX lens, then you need to compensate for the cropping factor. Here's an example. 500 divided by the focal length of a full frame sensor is equal to your shutter speed. 500 divided by the cropping factor times the focal length for DS is the shutter speed. And here's just a couple examples. I don't want to get too much into the math. Here's a Canon EOS with a crop factor of 1.6 times a 50 millimeter lens. So you can run that lens into the sky for nearly 6 seconds to capture as much light as possible before you get a star streak. Now with a D850 500 millimeter lens, I only have 1 second And I've actually tried this. I tried to shoot 2 seconds, and I tried to shoot 1 second without any tracker. And sure enough, 2 seconds, I got star streaks. So that's how you do it without any equipment. You go out, put it on the tripod, calculate your 500 rule and shoot, and keep yourself at a speed that keeps you faster than what your limit is. If you need to have more light, you got to crank your ISO up. Just crank up the ISO, which amplifies your light. Also, the 500, I don't know where they came up with this number, who devised this. It doesn't have anything to do with my 500 millimeter lens. It's just, that's just a coincidence. This was a different lens that was used there. But okay, let's move along here. And you can just come up with a table. You sit down with the calculator and take all the lenses that you'd want to use for astrophotography and make up a little table, put down the focal length, calculate how many seconds that you need to set your camera to. So print that on a little card. When you go out to do astrophotography, you're using 200 millimeters, so you need to look at the card, and that's the slowest your shutter speed should be set to, is the amounts that's in these columns. So you can do that in advance and get ready. City lights. Doesn't matter where you go, unless you go to a dark park, you are going to get light pollution. However, post-processing is excellent for removing light pollution. And so basically, don't worry about it too much. I use a lens hood on my camera, so I don't get any, if a car drives by or the neighbor's pole light's on, something like that. It kind of protects the end of the lens from any kind of pollution that comes up. Where we live, the biggest problem is clouds. And, you know, I walk out my front door at least twice a night looking at the sky. But check out this URL. I'm going to have the presentation link. I've got this posted on the internet. I'll tell you how to get a hold of this PDF presentation. So you don't need to write this down or anything, but you can search for Wonderground infrared. You'll find this. What I've discovered that, see these dark real, hello? Somebody talking? Is there a question? No. It's the dark gray area. I assure you, that's clear skies there. In here, clear skies. Over Indiana, obviously cloudy. We're not going to have anything. So you don't even need to. And you can run this radar, and it will animate like the last 4 hours. So you can kind of see if there's a clear spot heading our way. But I look at this. If it's gray over Indiana, I don't even bother. You're not going to find anything anyway. So that's the only thing you can do with clouds. Now, here's a great trick. You're out there, everything's black. You're photographing at night, in the dark. Your subject's essentially black because there's nothing to focus on. Here's what you can do to improve that. You really got to have a rear image display screen on your camera. It's going to be very difficult to do this if you don't have one of those. Some cameras have, most of the modern cameras have those. But you want to crank your ISO all the way out to the max, 25,000 ISO. I think I've even got some higher modes that are like night vision, but 25,000 ISO is usually good. Switch to live view. If you got a bright planet or a moon, autofocus on it. Switch your lens to manual. Make a note on the exact location of the focus indicator line on your infinity symbol. See, this is the focus indicator line. Notice it's pointing to the left of the infinity bar. You don't want to just crank out to infinity. I've never found that to be proper focus for stars. It's somewhere a little bit less than infinity. And take a cell phone picture of this. Next time you're out there, start from there. Switch your lens to manual and simply crank your lens aperture wide open. You're not going to gain any depth of field on stars. You're basically at infinity already. My lens wide open was 5.6. I switched to 1/100th second shutter speed, so it will take a quick shot to check. So you take a shot and you zoom in on your object and you check the focus. And it should be real clear because that high ISO will give you an image that you can look at. And you just keep repeating that, slowly moving your focus until you get nice, perfect round stars. And then take a look at this focus indicator again, and maybe even take a cell phone of it again, and always start from there. And then, and I've forgotten to do this, and 2 hours later regretted it, return your shutter speed down to a proper value and lower your ISO. I shot a whole night on ISO 25,000, ruined everything. A lot of times you'll be using your 500 rule for your number of seconds, or using bulb. If you're using a tracker, you'll probably be putting it on bulb. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Also, when you're turning your focus on your lens, I noticed mine has a little bit of slack. Like as you start to turn it, this doesn't really move for a fraction of a second, and then it kind of engages and then it starts to turn. Same thing the other direction. So just be aware there could be some slack. Just because you put it exactly here doesn't mean you're going to get exactly the same result the next night. You need to take the test shots and turn your ISO back down. Now, another problem is you can't see your camera. It's in the dark, and you know, I'm really clumsy, so I get up, I trip over the tripod, and knock it out of alignment. Just, you know, I'll just be standing there and I'll fall over. I'm so clumsy. So I got to kind of stay away from my equipment when I'm doing it. But really, just get yourself a headlamp. It frees up your hands. And the one on the left is, it's unfortunate I took that picture on an orange background. It's really white light. And here's a nice headlamp called I think it's called a black diamond, and it has red LEDs in it that you can just leave on. They don't mess up your vision. They don't generally mess up the photography. It's a really good idea, and you get a flashlight will work if you can't afford a headlamp. But now the temperature is pretty obvious. Dress appropriately, wear good boots, jacket, cap, whatever. It's getting really cold. You know, bundle up, and also invest in an inexpensive lens heater. I got this one here for less than 20 bucks. And I don't know where they came up with it. It's a Kuwu USB powered lens heater. It's got 3 different heat settings, plugs into USB. I happen to have this power brick for my cell phone or for my iPad when I'm at the doctor's office or somewhere. I just plug in. It runs 2 or 3 days. It'll operate your cell phone, your iPad for a couple of days. You plug this thing in and it wraps around your lens. And I've gone out about a month ago. I went out, everything outside, my gear, my equipment, the tripod, everything is completely covered with frost except my lens, because this thing was around it. And believe me, you get frosted up or a steamy lens, it's going to ruin every single shot you take. It's not a big deal. I would always have a cushion in the summer because you're kneeling down and doing stuff a lot. But in the winter, you can carry a small propane heater. It generally warms the area that you're standing in, and just makes it more comfortable. Also encourages your better half to come and join you, which has happened a couple times. So it's so cold out. I got the propane heater going, honey, and lawn chair. You're going to be sitting there for minutes or hours even, and use one with a cushion or a thin backing on a cushioned back, because the wind will come through the back of that chair. Atmosphere. Other than checking that infrared radar thing, there's not much you can do about the atmosphere. You're going to get constant atmospheric distortion on every shot. But the solution is take a bunch of shots. If you take 60 shots, 80 shots, 100 shots, the stacking software will eliminate all that distortion. It'll take all the stars, line them up, and turn them into nice, bright, clear objects. So don't worry about the atmosphere too much. I even see it. I'll be looking at Jupiter, and one of the moons will blink out and then come back on. Obviously, there's been something that's drifted across the sky that I can't see that eclipsed the stars for a moment. But now, if the moon's there, just forget it. Pack it in. If you're doing star photography, it's going to ruin everything, even if it's on another part of the sky. But may consider switching to moon photography instead. It's a good time to do that. In fact, I noticed the moon was so beautiful on the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that when I was done with the conjunction, I took shots of the moon. And I go and I look at the Astrophotography group on Facebook, and sure enough, there was a dozen people that said, well, I got tired of the conjunction, so I took pictures of the moon. You know, it's not all you can do when the moon's up. And the budget. If you really want to do well, you got to probably spend no more than 500 bucks getting a tracker. If the 500 rule is only going to go so far, you're never going to get out to 30 seconds with the 500 rule, which really draws a lot of light in. And then finally, I mean, you're taking these pictures for maybe hours on end. I mean, I'll set an alarm and just leave the kid out in my driveway and come back 25, 30 minutes later to, you know, I don't even sit out there very long, but that's going to take a long time. Depending upon whether you're looking through binoculars or telescope, you may have your image normal, it may be reversed, or it could be upside down. And fortunately with astrophotography, it doesn't matter. There's no up and down in space. So other than the moon, if you have the moon upside down, you'll notice, because the man in the moon won't be there anymore. But power, I don't really recommend batteries. If you have to use batteries, you're at a different location, you have to use them. There's not much you can do, but I use a little power strip that's got both power and USB ports on it, because I use 2 USB ports and 2 AC ports when I'm doing my astrophotography. So this is a nice one to get. And if you're really remote and you can't get like AC power anywhere, like Wolpe and I went over to this the parking lot of that sports park over in Grable. You almost have a 360-degree sky there. It's amazing. And but you know, you don't have any power. So I have this Celestron telescope. It's called a power tank that provides, these are plugins for cigarette lighter style power off like a car cigarette lighter. And then there's 2 USB ports and you can charge it up. The other advantage, it has a nice flashlight so you can see where you're walking. It also has a red light that'll illuminate the entire photography area, which is a neat way to do it. Because you don't have tripping over stuff like me. Now, post-processing. This is probably the most important part. Even if you're doing the 500 rule, you got to take a lot of images and you got to stack them. Now, don't worry about the fact that if you're using the 500 rule, that the stars are going to drift. As long as you can keep them in the frame of your shot and fairly close together, if you have to turn your camera a little bit, that's okay, because the stacking software will take your images, it'll find where all the stars are and it'll line them back up. There are limitations to it, but it's amazing some of the stuff that they can do with stacking. Now, stacking is more than just taking a bunch of shots and stacking them. Here's a shot where I took 7 60-second exposures of Andromeda and I stacked them. And it doesn't look like much. It's like a fuzzy little blob. That's Andromeda. And there's some stars. That's it. And if you don't have software specific for astrophotography, you're going to be limited. Here I took Lightroom and Photoshop. I took that previous shot and I did the best I could to try to bring out Andromeda. You can see it's still it's better. You can see the structure of the spiral arms. You can see M110, which is another spiral galaxy over here. But what happens is I had to bring up all the light, and in Lightroom and Photoshop, unless you're using masks or something, it's going to bring up the light of everything. You can't see it, but in the background, it's brought up all this ugly noise just so I could see this type of detail in the foreground. And so the problem is, you know, it works on the whole photo. It doesn't really specifically work on the things that you want to worry about. Now, here's what I took. This is the same shot. And I took and I ran it through a program called PixInsight. And it has special software that knows what you're doing. It's for astrophotographers. It knows that you're trying to keep the stars and get rid of all this background noise that's behind there. And if you zoom in on this, it would just be a big mess of grain and noise. And that software, it just seems to know what it's doing. It'll take a pass over the whole photo, and sometimes you'll get vignetting from light pollution or light from the city or different problems. Like this has a little bit of a blue glow to it. You can remove those things real specifically without affecting the image. And so you go, okay, this is what I started with. Here's what the software gave me to end with. I just was stunned the first time I saw this. I thought that came out of that? How can that be? But what's going on is your camera has got a lot better eyes than you do. It can see all this low light, all these faint little bits of light that are all squished down into almost a black band. And so what they do is they call it stretching. When you get into the software, when you're trying to guide what you want to be enhanced, you can't really see the detail. They'll stretch it, and I'm not sure exactly what all it does, but it's almost like turning your exposure all the way up with the contrast, and the whiteness will crank it up temporarily so you can see stuff. And there's all types of detail. Once you try to amplify that, what happens is, yeah, you start to get something like Andromeda and some other things, but you start to get all the noise, and this stuff comes out and it ruins the shot. And so the software knows how to take care of that. And there's another way, even without a tracker, just using the camera that you've got, is you can create what's called calibration frames. And Pixinsight is the software I use, and it uses those calibration frames. And you can take even like an average shot. This shot, I'm going to back up. I did not use any calibration. This is a 6 or 7 shot stack that was enhanced through Pixinsight. I didn't take any calibration frames. I was just first starting when I took this. I didn't know what to do. I was just learning. I still don't know much what to do, but I can make some calibration frames right now. I can go take a look at I think I shot that at 480 millimeter, ISO 100, a certain number of seconds, 60 seconds. I can make some calibration frames and redo that and get rid of a lot of the noise. Calibration frames are weird shots that you take while you're doing your shoot. So you go out and you take your main camera at your celestial object, and then you put like you create a white balance shot, and then you put your lens cap on, and you take some more shots, and then you put the lens cap on and you shoot at your highest shutter speed. I mentioned dark flats. I've never used those, but all these other 4 types of frames I'm planning on using in my next shoot, and I can even make some. Now the lights are just your shot that you took. They're called subs or lights. Then for flats, you simply take a white t-shirt, put a rubber band on it, put it over the end of your telescope or your lens, and take 15 or 20 shots. Take a look at your histogram. Your histogram should be between 1/3 and 2/3. And this is a good histogram. If your histogram is smashed over to the right or smashed over to the left, you need to move your light source. Like for example, you could point it at the sky, the sunrise. I've got a little LED light tray that I can turn. I can put it on a tripod and I could point it to the lens. If my histogram showed it was all plastered over to the right, I'd want to move that light source away or turn it down a little bit until I get something. And so you end up with these lights, a bunch of them. Now the darks are almost the most important. Here's an example of that image I showed you, and I said when I amplified that, I ended up with all this noise, and that's terrible. Look at all this. Like this, you can't even really see what this is exactly. You can see the stars and you can see something here, but if you use darks, you end up with this. And notice the stars are almost identical, but you can see the banding of Andromeda real clearly. And this is zoomed way, way, way in. When you pull back, it's a beautiful, nice, clear black shot. It'll tremendously improve your astrophotography. And then there's a bias frame. And this is really weird. I couldn't hardly believe it, but you put the lens cap back on. You can do this inside later, and you just simply take a bunch of shots, 50 or 100 of them, with the lens cap on at the highest shutter speed possible. Like maybe it's 1/6000th or 1/10,000th of a second. And what it does is those get stacked. And this is a stretched version of it, which means that it's been amplified so you can see the distortion. But this is the electronic noise in the camera. All these weird lines and stuff. And admittedly, when you go to do the correction, it would look like more of a black frame, but it's there. That noise is there, and it takes it out of the frame and brings out the detail of whatever you're trying to shoot. Dark flats I've not used. I just mentioned them because you may end up looking at software that requires that. And there's another thing I discovered. if you go into your camera, you have high ISO noise reduction or long exposure noise reduction, it's going to double the time that it takes for your shot to finish. For example, I started shooting 60-second shots, and it wouldn't be done for 120 seconds. And then I was completely puzzled by that, because, you know, if you're trying to do circular North Pole star trails or something, it's going to ruin your shot, because you suddenly got this big 60-second gap, and you know, it'd take twice as long. I tried to do 10 shots at 60 seconds. You know, it would take twice that long. It would take you know, instead of 10 minutes, it'd take 20 minutes. So you get a little bit of improvement using the camera's noise reduction, but it's going to take you forever. I recommend you turn all your noise reduction off so that your turnaround and your shots are real quick. It also messed up by the tracking. The tracker has got software that'll take a picture. My camera only goes up to 25 seconds. Otherwise, it goes to bulb, which means the shutter stays open as long as you're holding the shutter, the trigger. But in the software that they have will let you run like way past 25 seconds. You can go 2, 3, 4 minutes, and the iPad actually controls the camera. And so if you're counting on a 60-second exposure and you say, okay, wait 5 seconds and then take the next one, suddenly the shots will start to run over on each other. You'll end up with like a 5-second shot or a 7-second shot. It messes everything up. Turn off noise reduction for astrophotography. Now, one interesting thing about the Star Adventure is the same thing that lets it turn at the same speed as the rotation of the Earth. They have the ability to crank that up to 12 times the rotation of the Earth. And you can do stuff like point to the North Star, and you can get an entire night worth of star trails in 2 hours, because it'll run 12 times as fast. It'll give you all the star trails that you need, but you don't have to sit there all night waiting for the 12-hour period or 10-hour period to be up. The other thing you can do with trackers is you can simply, you know, set them up somewhere and have that same 12 times rotation running straight out on a landscape. So you can take these time-lapse pictures that slowly turn, and you can have the sunrise over a mountain or whatever, just with the tracker. Amazing, some amazing things. It's like a shot controller. We're almost done. I wanted to show some of the software. There's hundreds and hundreds of astrophotography software, and you know, they'll control your camera, your focusing. It'll acquire your images. It solves plate problems, which are where you've got like vignetting and problems with some of the auto guiding features. All kinds of things you can do. Here's a list of them. These are for image calibration, aligning and stacking. I've used all the blue ones, and I recommend them. Notice some of them are free. Unfortunately, Pix Insights, really expensive. If you're going to get serious, I'd recommend something at least like that. Pix Insights, awesome. 281 bucks, unfortunately. Sequator's free. That's a good stacking software. Doesn't give you the kind of results Pix Insight does, but it's free, and you can stack and get some good results. Image correction. I hear a lot of astrophotographers talking about GIMP, but as it turns out, it's just a Photoshop clone. I thought it was maybe astrophotography. I use Photoshop Retail. I got a subscription. And then, so you can, I wanted to see, for example, what is it that the conjunction is going to look like, and what part of the sky is it going to be in? So you can get stellariums free, and you can say, okay, show me what Jupiter and Saturn look like on January 27th, and it'll, at 8 p.m., it'll take that and show you a sky chart, a real-time picture of the sky on that date. So you can kind of plan, well, I'm going to be facing towards sunset, or I'm going to be up in the sky. Really good stuff. Stellarium is amazing. You can just, you know, go around and like look at the sky and zoom in and find all kinds of stuff. It's neat. Okay, that's it. If you want to get a PDF of this presentation, go to my website, kilgorski.com. How do I get out of here? Stop share?
So, nope, stay in it. Yeah, so Thank you, Larry. That was, I did not call that a rookie presentation. I don't know if anybody else was like, what? We're opening it up to questions, and I'll start. And if you would dummy it down a little bit on stacking, and so I'm stacking even if I want just a basic Milky Way photo. And what am I changing where I'm focusing? Because obviously it's not like focusing on a beetle and the front and the middle and the back of the beetle. Can you talk about that a little bit, Larry?
Yeah, I mean, the stacking is to, if you could imagine that you had like 10 transparencies that you could see through, and there were star dots on those transparencies. If you stacked them up and then held them up to the light, where the star dots would be much more defined because you've stacked a bunch of transparencies together. What it does is it kind of amplifies the stars. So when you're stacking, you want to be perfectly focused on your celestial object, and you don't want to move anything, your camera, nothing, and you want to just start taking your shots, get as many of them as you can, and then you use some of those other techniques like the darks and the lights and the bias frames. You would do some of them then, you do some of them when you got back in the house. And yeah, if you're just looking at the Milky Way, your Milky Way shots are going to be so much better with calibration frames added into them. And PixInsight, it actually will load. I can show that to you if you want, what it's like to load those. I have to share my screen again. Share screen. Share. Can you see me again?
Yep, it's up.
PixInsight is PixInsight's really expensive, and it is really complicated to use. I was lost for a couple months. This is what it looks like. The part that you're talking about stacking comes from, I mean, the amount of things that you can do with this are daunting. I looked at this list of stuff and I thought, my God, what is this?
Oh, man.
And I'm trying to remember what it was. There's a script process. You can simply go and say, I want to do star alignment, and it'll bring in a bunch of your shots and it'll align all of them to the stars. So that it'll turn them and move them and slide them over and give you a final image that's all merged with the stars all lined up. And they also have, but that only works with your main shots. They have a script where you can batch process, and you use what's called a weighted batch processing. When you go into that window, notice over here they have lights, flats, darks, and bias frames, and you literally drag your different types into these different tabs, and then when you run it, it merges. It knows what to do. It merges it. Runs for like 10 minutes, and it merges that all together, correcting all of your mistake or your pollution, your light pollution, or any kind of noise that's come up. That's what it looks like.
Wow.
It's amazing software.
And I noticed you weren't using photo pills, which is what I've always seen recommended and what I've used, which is like right now, if I bring it up, it'll show me where the planets are and where they'll be at 10 o'clock tonight and where they'll be on February 19th if I'm going to go shoot in a dark park that day. Do you use that, or have you found something you like better?
Yeah, that's kind of like Stellarium.
Okay.
Where's the share button again? Or share screen?
Should be at the bottom. It should be bright green.
Yeah. What was it called? There's a lot of them. There's a lot of
photo pills. PILLS. It's a French program, and so the word's a little weird. It's not on your list.
No.
But it's the same idea. Where you can plan for everybody else. It's very inexpensive, and it lets you plan ahead, so that and for example, if you want to get the moon in the underneath the Eiffel Tower, if that's the photo you want, or in an arch or on a beach right over the pine tree or something, it'll tell you when that will occur. And it will and set you up. So if I want to do a photo of Ron Patton standing on a bridge and the moon directly behind him, it'll tell me whether that's only going to happen in 10 years from now or whether it's going to happen every 4 days.
Photo
So,
pills, that's what it's called. That sounds good.
Yeah, PILLS. So I imagine yours is similar. That's the only one
Yeah. When I started looking through software for astrophotography, it was endless.
yeah, it's a big thing. So do we have some questions from anybody? You can just unmute and ask your questions, or for those that that maybe don't have audio, we have a couple of problems. You can put them in the chat, and I'm watching the chat. And while we're waiting, we have another one of our scholarship winners had a little trouble getting on, and Danielle Ellingwood is here also, and she is one of our new Lynn Gehrig scholarship winners. So welcome, Danielle. We're glad to have you. I am not Kris Gay. I am Brenda Fishbaugh, who emailed you, and Jim Wolpe's on here. If you go through the pictures, you'll see Jim that I know you've been corresponding with too.
Hey, Larry.
Yeah.
When you use your tracking technique on your camera, are you using a continuous shot or are you using multiple interval timing sequences?
They're multiple images. They're all the fixed number of seconds. Even with the trackers have limitations that an auto guider will solve. But my tracker, if you get above 30 seconds, you'll start to see star trails. But 30 seconds is quite a long time. But you're taking 30-second shots over and over and over and over again, like 10, 20, 30 of them at 30 seconds each.
Are you configuring that with the interval timing function on your camera or something different?
It's something different. The star tracker that I've got's got an iPhone app. It connects to the tracker, and you can say how many number of seconds you want, how many pauses between, how many seconds you pause between, then how many shots do you want to take. So you'd put like 30 seconds, maybe a 5-second pause between for the camera to settle down, and then take 10 of them. And so
the reason I ask is because the Nikons I have, both of them have that interval timing feature, and the options you're mentioning seem to be the same ones it has.
Yeah, they do have that interval. Yeah, I've seen that before.
It's used a lot for like animation GIFs.
Yeah.
But I was just curious. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. The tracker software also, you can put it into like lunar mode or sidereal mode to track stars or the planets, which are different tracking rates.
Okay.
And so it takes care of that for you too. On the tracker, if you do it manually, like what you're talking about with the interval functions, you have to turn a dial to stars or planets so that it continues to track at a certain speed. But the iPad's made it so much easier to do everything.
Oh, okay. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Believe me, this stuff's not as hard as it looks. I can do it.
So Charm left you a funny message, which is, thanks, Larry. I have to admit, I feel like a real dummy because most of it went all over my head. And I'm thinking, quote, Larry is a genius, unquote.
Go out and shoot. Go out and shoot something.
Baffled us with BS here. So Larry, I have an intervalometer, which allows me to hold a shutter open as long as I want. So completely away from astrophotography, for example, if I'm shooting a waterfall, I can have it stay open for a long time. And so you can set it for exactly how many seconds you want and how many repetitions you want. Do you not use something like that when you're shooting?
Well, of course, you have to have a tracker, that 500 rule. No matter what kind of intervalometer you've got, if you can't go more than 3 seconds, it's not going to do you any good to have something that leaves your shutter speed open longer than that. So certainly the repetitive shots you need to take 10, 20, 30 of them, intervalometer, bad word, intervalometer will work for that, but you got to maintain your 500 rule without a tracker or you'll get star trails.
Right, and the photo pill shows you that amount for your lens, whichever lens you're using. Yeah. It does the calculation for you, so you know it's.
I'm sure there's really websites that do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was showing how you had to do some math, and there are free apps that'll figure that for you so that your stars don't turn into blobs. What did you call them when they start moving? Because
Star trails or pedestals.
pedestals, yeah. Well, because the
Pe-
star trail's like an intentional thing as opposed to.
Yeah, pedestals are more like when you stack. You got like you got a star trail and stacking a bunch of round stars on it, and you end up with like a round star with a little pedestal because of the trail. And so those aren't. And you know, one thing you can do is if you got 60 shots and you got 3 of them with star trails, just delete those. Only stack with 57 shots. Or if you've got like a satellite that went through it, you know, get rid of that shot. So the more shots you got, the better your results, and the more leverage you've got on correcting like problem shots too.
Does anybody have any basic questions for Larry? Where to start or something like that? I noticed somebody else mentioned, Leah, you mentioned photo pills. Are you doing some night photography? You can turn on your mic if you'd like.
No, I was hoping to. I got the app and tried it, but after watching this, I might be able to go and attempt, but I'll need some practice.
Yeah, I will tell you, they have I'm sure for all these apps, they have these training programs, and like the photo pill guy is French. So you're dealing with an accent plus all this crazy math. So you want to like shoot the guy. And so I found a couple of, you know, people that sound like me talking about it and doing the workshop. So it's not with like, this is already so complicated. I really don't want to try to undo all the accents and the different words from a different culture and stuff.
Oh God, I mean, the equipment I've seen, $20, $30, $50,000 worth of equipment on some of this, that astrophotography. You want to see what some really cool stuff, join the astrophotography group on Facebook. They have 75,000 members. They produce a spectacular eye-popping image, 4 per hour, 7 by 24 by 365. I've never seen so much activity. I mean, there are a ton of people all over the world doing this with major telescope equipment and cameras. Like, you could spend a fortune trying to do this.
Excuse me. Spend a fortune not doing that.
Yeah.
So Larry Gaskill just spoke, and Larry is also a night photographer and is going to do a workshop later on about night photography. And Larry Gaskill, we were talking about like we might want to hold your presentation off until we can all go shoot because of COVID. You know, it's not very feasible to go shoot in April or something. So Larry Kilgore has invited us out to his place to shoot, but obviously after COVID is over and we're all vaccinated up and all of that. So, so we may play with when your presentation is, but he'll also be reviewing what's in this presentation and some, you know, some other things. So we might just, talk about doing just star trails one night or just the moon, or obviously the easiest thing's the moon. Is that true, Larry and Larry?
Oh yeah, it's a breeze. You know, there's a really cool video you might want to look on YouTube, how to do stunning HDR moon photography. There's a bunch of videos of how to do that, where you take like a quarter moon and you take an HDR shot, you know, running you're bracketing like a third or 2/3 of a stop across 5 or 10, and then you merge them in a certain way, because like when you've done that, even the moon is going to be all blown out where the sun hits it, but then as the exposure gets lower and lower and lower, that comes into focus. But while the sun's blowing out the quarter moon, the other side of the moon, the darker, the part that's in shadow, this becomes clear, and you can see that. And there's a way you can merge the properly exposed moon and the other half of the moon and the glow around the moon in a special way, that the most stunning moon shots. So go out and shoot the moon to start with. Look at my PDF off my website, read it again, and get going. It's hard. It's really easy to do. You can shoot the planets. You can shoot
Does it-
constellations, galaxies, nebula.
Does
you
it have
say-
to be really
say
dark when
again?
you're shooting the moon?
I'm sorry, what?
Does it have to be really dark when you're shooting the moon?
I've
Just
shot it during the day before, but the problem with the moon is it's really bright. That's one of the things that you won't be using, 1, 2, 5-second exposures. You'll be using like a 1/10 of a second or a 100th of a second because it's a really, really bright object. And so it's really easy to shoot. You can shoot it on a tripod. You're not going to have star trails with it. It's one of the first things I ever shot. And, check out that HDR stunning moon from HDR on YouTube, and it shows you how to do it. It's really, really cool thing to do. You'll win the next digital competition if you do that.
You did win. You did win with that shot, didn't you, Larry?
With the moon, the werewolf shot.
Oh, I was thinking you had a moon photo in nature recently also.
Um,
Yeah, I think so.
I can't remember. In nature, I had Andromeda.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking it was before that.
Yeah,
Julie,
I remember that one. I remember that one, Brenda. He did
Yeah,
have a moon shot.
I think you won with that.
Yeah.
Julie Bemis, you had a question. Am I saying your last name right? Did you have a
Bem-
question?
Yeah, Bemis. Yeah, so
Yes.
Larry, could you say again the types of lenses that you were using? You mentioned a 500 millimeter. Can you discuss that a little more in detail, types of lenses to start
Yeah.
off with?
Yeah, if you're just talking about, I've got a D850, Nikon D850 with a 200 to 500 millimeter f5.6. It's a cheaper, powerful lens, but boy, they really got some good glass in that, and it's got VR, which you want to turn VR off for this. Anything on a tripod, you don't need vibration reduction, but the 500 millimeter, some interesting problems that I had with it was I'd point the lens straight up into the sky, and the lens would slide back a little bit. It'd slide back to 450 or 480, and so I ended up putting electrical tape on the lens. I wrapped it with electrical tape so it wouldn't move. So I had it basically locked in at 500. And the problem with that is that if you take 500 divided by 500, I can't shoot any slower than 1 second. Now, if I went with a 200, I'd get more like 2.5 seconds. So although I get to zoom in really well with the 500, it's real sensitive. I mean, you touch that camera or even blow your breath on the camera, it will move the lens and ruin your shot. So did I answer your question, Julie?
Yeah. And so you're using a remote, obviously, right?
Yeah, I use like a RF remote trigger.
Yeah. Okay.
And you obviously can't touch it very well. Also, you can, they have some settings on that, like a quiet mode. There's also a mirror up, a MUP setting. So the mirror is up, so that you can get a little bit of barrel slap from the mirror. The mirror will flip while it's taking the shot, and it'll actually make the lens vibrate. It'll go down the lens and then return like a vibration and affect your shots sometimes. So, I've been wanting to go out with a smaller lens because obviously if you're doing Milky Way, you're probably going to want to do like a 1424 or a 2470 lens where you can get a real wide angle, the whole broad part of the sky. Now, when you're shooting with those really, really wide lenses, you can go 5-10 seconds without getting any star trails. Because if you take 500 divided by 14, I'm not going to do the math, but you can imagine it's a many seconds. So, Milky Way is easy because you can take it with the smaller lenses, just put it on a tripod. You don't need a tracker. You can just shoot 5 or 10 seconds and stack them.
Okay.
Take some
Sounds
calibration frames. Yeah, sure.
So when Larry, I have a question. When you stack those images, like for the Milky Way, is it like HD shooting? Everything settings all the same. You just repeatedly take 5, 6, 7 shots, then merge them.
Yeah.
Stack them.
Yeah, they recommend even more. They recommend 50, 60 basic shots, and they all have to be absolutely identical in every way.
But
So-
as the Earth, my question is, the Earth's rotating. Does the software compensate for the movement?
Yes, to a certain degree. If you've got like a smaller lens, obviously your stars are going to slowly drift out of frame.
Yeah.
As the Earth moves, the sky appears to move and it will drift out of frame. So the software will try to bring those back together. It has limitations. So let's say in your frame, a certain star has drifted. You've got 5 frames and they've each drifted like a quarter of an inch across your resulting image. It'll try to bring those together and stack them. But as you can imagine, one frame's got more on the right and the next frame doesn't have quite as much on the right. So what you end up with is you end up with a bunch of stacks with rough edges all around it. Like the squares of the frames get messed up because it's moving the stars to line them up. So the edges of the frames get out of line. Now, if you use a tracker, you don't have that problem because you basically got the same shot over and over and over again. It doesn't really move on you much.
And so you would probably use a higher shutter speed would be more beneficial than a slower one.
Yeah.
Because you can get the 50 quicker in a shorter period of time.
Yeah, that's for sure. Because I've been sitting out there for hours before, trying to wait that thing get done, shooting, 60-second shots. You take 50, 60-second shots and you got a 5-second in between. I mean, and then you get them done. You take them inside at midnight. And, take a look at these. They're all out of focus.
On that.
I've done that many times. I'm going, I just wasted my whole evening and I deleted all the shots. I mean, you got to make sure that section on the PDF where it talks about using the high ISO to get things in focus perfectly, reread that. That's so important to get that right.
Hey, are you okay with me adding that to the recording and when we send that out, or when we, Jerry, what do you suggest? We post it on the members page and then email it out?
Send me,
I
would need
yeah, we have his PDF plus we'll have the recording.
give me those as individual files and I can take care of them from there. We can put them on the members' Facebook page, but since they're individual files, I can also put them up. The people that don't have access to Facebook can get access to them also.
Yeah, the PDF's 2.7 meg. You could probably email that, couldn't you?
Yeah, typically.
Yeah, you can get it off my website and do anything you want to with it. Brenda, Jerry, feel free.
Right.
What's your website again?
www.kilgorski.com.
SKY or SKI?
SKI. Let me type it again in the chat.
It's in the chat if you want to flip.
Okay.
That's a good one.
Famous.
SKY.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
That's my nickname. Kilgorski's my nickname.
Hey, Larry.
Yeah.
I see lots of shots that are wide angle shots that have some really beautiful, astro type stuff, stars and such, with also landscape details like in the lower part of the frame, in the foreground. Do you have any insights, tips, or tricks on how to get that kind of exposure where you have the landscape as well as the stars?
Yeah, I mean, you can take a shot earlier where it's light, and then you can add that in at the end to a stacking session. The other thing I do is I'll just do light painting. Take like a flashlight, and while you're doing your exposure, you just paint the light, paint the trees, or paint the landscape with a flashlight. So it depends. I'd have to see an example of the ones that you're talking about, but yeah, I mean, you could obviously take some shots with change the ISO and make the ISO real high. That'd bring on the trees. I've taken some shots where my trees are all perfectly lit up because I took one shot with higher ISO. It depends on what they're trying to do. I'd have to take a look at the shot to guess what they might have been up to. But
Hey, Bill.
Yeah.
Are you talking about ones that have the foreground illuminated also?
Yes.
Okay. One issue, he did mention the flashlight is one technique. I've seen people use their flash for their camera and just fire the flash during at some point in time during the exposure, and some trial and error there. They may flash it once or twice during that 20 or 30-second exposure to get variations in the foreground lighting. And I think it's what you're looking for.
Yeah. And then does that fancy stacking software that you mentioned, that PixInsight, can it deal with that, where you might have one or two frames that have the foreground lit, or does that confuse the software?
Yeah, I haven't run into that yet. They'd have to have a special thing that says, hey, keep this as a normal shot kind of thing. But no, it's pretty technical what they're doing with that stacking. I mean, they're looking at your image as an XY grid, and they're finding stars, and they're moving things based on fractional, movements of the stars. And so I don't know what it would do with a landscape thing. It would confuse it because the stacking process tries to get stars to be perfectly aligned across 40, 50 shots. So I think that would mess it up, but you could add that back in later in Photoshop as a second layer.
Okay.
There's Facebook groups out there that I follow, and they got amazing stuff out there. One's called Night Photography Facebook group, and it's just incredible some of the stuff that these guys do. And they get very sophisticated with some of their foreground lighting. In the old days, they used to use the flashlights or the flash speed lights, but now they go to the LED lights that have got variable levels of illumination on them, and sometimes they're just on very briefly to bring out just a little bit of illumination in the foreground, and they got a spectacular sky. And
so Jim, are these people in this Facebook group pretty forthcoming with the techniques that they use?
Yeah. One of my favorite guys to follow, he lives out in New Mexico, and his name is Wayne Suggs, Suggs. And this guy is incredible, and he loves petroglyphs. The old, the Native American carvings on stone, petroglyphs. And he'll have something like that in his foreground, and it'll be up on a mountaintop or something like that. And a beautiful night sky, but he's got just enough illumination on the petroglyphs in the foreground. It's just spectacular what they do out there. And there's so many different variations of the lighting that you could do, as well as, of course, while you're still in twilight or right at dusk too. There's a lot of stuff going on Facebook that's, a lot of these type of groups. And Royce Blair is one of the gurus of night photography, getting the stars. And he kind of runs some of these night photography Facebook groups.
Oh yeah, and the pandemic has put everybody sitting around at home, and I'll just set my tripod up and shoot the stars. And I can't believe the flood of astrophotography right now because of that. Just everywhere. I wish I had like a star tracker company. I'd be selling these things like hotcakes.
There's a lot of neat stuff happening out there. Well done, Larry.
Thank you. Yeah,
Good
read
job.
the PDF. If you're interested, read the PDF again. There's a lot of good info in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. That was really
Thank
good.
you, Larry. Good job.
Thank you.
Julie B. Miss has written that some universities with observatories, if you make a contribution in any amount to the astronomy department or observatory, you can be invited to astronomy talks, and UC Berkeley is one of them.
Wow.
Larry, have you done anything with, isn't there an observatory at Fox Island?
Yes, there used to be.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's not functional currently?
Well, it was
Used to be.
there was one over in the parking lot, a little dome thing. I've seen, they sell little plastic dome huts that you can buy. You can set your camera up in it during the day and cover it and pull the dome open at night, and you can heat it, keeps the bugs out a little bit. Your own personal observatory at home. I always wanted one. A big house, and the roof goes up and flattens out, and there's like a big dome, and I can put my telescope up there permanently, and never have to move
Well, there
it.
you go.
That'd be cool.
There's your next project for your house.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have completely wooded property. So,
Yeah, there's that too.
yeah.
Right.
Oh.
Anybody else have any questions going out to shoot? Want people to join you that are already through COVID or through their vaccinations or something? Anything else going on? Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining us. Larry, thank you so much, especially for jumping in with Kris being sick. Our next presentation is going to be on February 16th at 7 o'clock. It's on macro photography by Kris Gay. She's going to do macro not only like on bugs, but she shoots wedding rings that way. She shoots musical instruments that way. So she's going to show she's going to show a lot of tricks on how you can do it without a macro lens, just some inexpensive things. And while I was looking for your Facebook groups, I noticed that there's a budget astrophotography group. So that sounds like that might be a useful place to start.
That's for me. I don't have any money.
So
Did you set that up, Larry?
I wouldn't be surprised now.
Yeah.
But you can spend as much as you want on this hobby.
Yeah.
Trust me.
I'm sure.
right. Well,
Hey, Brenda,
yes.
thank you for being Kris Gay tonight too.
Oh,
Yes, thank you,
Yes,
Brenda.
My name is Kris Gay. I am Kris Gay. I am
Except a lot healthier.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, guys.
right. And we have, as I said, thank you to our two new members, our Lynn Gehrig scholarships for joining us, and somebody else
Yes.
trying to get accepted into the members page, but doesn't have her full name. So I wasn't able to, she's trying to get on the members page, I think, to get the link. So,
Yeah.
that's one more person I'll hopefully be able to get in. And everybody, this is our president, Brian. Go ahead and talk, Brian, so they see you.
Oh, I just wanted to say welcome to the club, both of you. Great to have you.
So, perfect. Well,
Hey,
everybody,
Brenda?
thank you so much. And we'll see you out on our members page on Facebook, as well as we have a group page. It has like 800 members. Only a few are actual members. So we have a private page for club members to discuss things and get help. And we look forward to everybody being out on our critique site. Our competition ends on February 1st. Right now, our voting for our club vote is going on for voting for your favorite photos. It's going very differently. Nobody's voting with what the judges liked.
When's it end? What's the deadline for
The 22nd.
Thank you.
22nd, and which is too bad because I did really well this month, and nobody's voting for those.
Oh, we will.
No, I mean they're voting for others. That's
Oh, well, that's
right.
live.
That's what the club voted. And then our topics coming up for February are arches and action, along with nature and open, which is anything that's not PSA nature. And so arches. So be creative. PSA loves, if you've noticed, the judges really award creativity.
Yeah,
they do.
And your title really makes a big difference. So
Sure
like
does.
a couple of people just did title like mask or flower. If you have a clever title or a really descriptive title or something fresh, it does much better than tulip. So they do take that into account, and that can be a tiebreaker or a deal breaker for you. So anyway, arches, be creative, and action, which again is great for creativity also.
Yeah, those sound good.
So all right, perfect. Well,
All
thank
right.
you so much, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody. Bye.
Thank you, folks.
Bye.
Thanks, Brenda.
Bye.
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 Bye.